Hello, everybody, and welcome to the new episode of the GDA Conversations series, which is brought to you by the Gulf Downstream Association, GDA. And for those who don't know GDA is a non-profit association founded by major refiners in the Gulf region, which are POPCO, Saudi Aramco, KNPC, KPI, and ADNOC. And the purpose of that is for sharing knowledge and experience among downstream players in the region. My name is Aqil Al-Maharraqi. I'm working for POPCO as Superintendent of CCU and Utilities in the Technical Services Department. I'm also playing the role of chairperson for the GDA Technologies Technical Committee. And it is my honor today to moderate this webinar, which is titled Critical Technological Aspects for a Reliable Residue Hydrocracking. As you know, residue hydrocracking process is important for refineries that are aiming in improving conversion of the bottom of the barrel by maximizing diesel production and reducing fuel oil yield. And at POPCO, we are currently constructing our first residue hydrocracker, which is based on LC fining technology. And there are a few licensors for residue hydrocracker in the market, and CLG is one of the major licensors and catalyst vendors as well for residue hydrocracking. This is why we are having our guest speakers today from CLG. In today's session, we will be having two experts from CLG, Aaron Arora and Wei Louis. Aaron is the Director Hydrocracking Technology, who is responsible for technical support for business development proposals in new technology and catalyst commercialization with focus on distillate and residue conversion. He has more than 30 years of experience with 20 years at CLG. Before joining CLG, Aaron was working in, actually he joined CLG in 2000, and before that he worked in operations and EPC. Aaron holds a bachelor degree in chemical engineering from National Institute of Technology in India and master's degree in technology management from Columbia University in New York. Louis is Senior Director of Engineering. He is responsible for proposals and the process design of hydroprocessing units. His career spans over 46 years in Lamas Technology with 28 years at CLG. He holds bachelor and master's degree in chemical engineering from Polytechnic Institution of Brooklyn in New York. Now let's welcome our speakers to take us through their presentations, and we will start with Aaron. Aaron.
So thank you everyone for joining here at this presentation, and greetings to all of you. And thanks to Aqil and Raj and whole GDA team for offering CLG an opportunity to talk about this important subject, I think, because residue upgrading is becoming a necessity per se for especially to stay competitive for a long term for a refiner. And today, both Mr. Louis and I, we are excited to discuss this topic of what are the critical technology aspects to be kept in mind by even while operating or while designing a residue hydrocracking technology. A brief agenda. I'll go over very quickly what are the major factors which influence residue hydrocracker reliability, why unit shuts down primarily, and broad feed characterization which we perform or a refiner can perform, and major analytical tools at our disposal, key design factors which need to be factored in while designing a unit. Catalyst system, of course, is heart of the system. And then very briefly, what to do with the UCO, some high conversion solutions feasible, whether it's existing LC fining or whether it's a new LC fining being conceptualized. and downstream processing of LC fining products, because LC fining does not produce products which are saleable. It needs to be further processed or blended to make a saleable product. And then for reliability, training a trained staff is utmost important, and very quick on training, but I'll cover very briefly, and I think the timing is around 20-25 minutes, and we look forward to more lively discussion after that. So I'll start with what are the major factors today which are influencing reliability. Well, with over 40 years of technology development and multiple LC fining units in operation and pilot database, today LC fining units reliability and operating factors are approaching very close to distillate hydrocracker. And we have seen that in our recent units which started up, like GS Caltex in 2010. And most recently, we have started up Northwest unit in Canada in 2019. So most of the design and equipment related challenges which used to be there in older units causing shutdown have been pretty much addressed in our new designs. And I think it's evident even in the first LC fining unit, which started up in 1984, is not only operating still, it's actually implementing new design features and undergoing an expansion, which speaks volume about unit's reliability and confidence in the technology. And today, major factor which are limiting units availability is asphaltene precipitation, or what we call sediments at the back end of the unit, especially if the unit is designed aggressively or operated beyond certain severity for that speed and design parameters. That issue is still bothering operating units and could bother any unit. So it's very, very important to understand this following multiple factors. So I'll spend maybe most time on this slide, and then the remaining will be relatively quicker. So feed is an important part because LC fining is primarily a thermal process, and it is highly dependent on feed or rather crude source and the reactor conditions, both together, especially temperature and aromatic diluent available or not. That should be factored in, of course. And the feedstock, not only crude limited or crude factors are important, but also feed overlap. How much is the VR only and how much is HVGO coming in? Because that plays a part in your conversion if you're measuring conversion on cut point based, not on apparent based. Diluent quality, especially all low value streams in the refinery. If you have FCC, then slurry oil. If you don't have FCC, that's okay. Unit can be designed without diluent. And in today's world industry, there's more emphasis on petrochemical production. So especially from mixed feed steam cracker, the pie oil which is being generated, and going forward, it has probably no home because high sulfur fuel oil has no market. LC fining loves that pie oil. It actually acts as a diluent and it provides stability. And most of the LC fining units, they have two trains with two reactors with interstage separators. So the injection of diluent is also very important between first and second reactor. the 50-55% of the reactor's severity occurs in first reactor and the remaining occurs in the second reactor. So the diluent where to inject and bypassing the feed plays a critical role in the stability. On the reactor side, the liquid space, hourly space velocity, many older units, if they push it, they cut back. It's within the reactor, there are three phases: gas, liquid, and solid, which is catalyst. And so once you run the unit, people develop multiple handles to adjust the space. You can reduce the gas rate to the limit and lower the gas hold up and increase liquid hourly volume. But from a design perspective, LHSV is very, very important for fixing reactor temperature for a given feed and for the given severity for conversion. For CCR, HTCCR required if UCO has to go as a blending stock to, let's say, VLSFO today. So very, very important reactor temperature, which is again a function of space. CCR conversion is more function of catalyst, and catalyst between reactor 1 and reactor 2 has to be tailored, and many older units which started up with single catalyst system as a cascade system, which is going from reactor 2 to reactor 1, are now realizing the benefit of dual catalyst system, which is tailored for each reactor. Makes much more sense because the first reactor is seeing primarily the fresh feed, which has metals and contaminants, and it is doing some initial part of HTS and HTM. But the crux or the deeper HDS, the deeper conversion, the deeper HTCCR is happening in the second reactor. So the distribution of meso and macro pores and metal levels has to be adjusted to get the optimum performance from each reactor. Hydrogen partial pressure plays an important role in minimizing sediments and providing stability, especially for Middle Eastern and Urals and all that type of feed. If it is a Canadian, synthetic crude oil is the objective, and feed is somewhat partially de-asphalted as some of the units in Canada. Then the partial pressure can be slightly lower, but typically it has to be in the range of 1800 partial pressure at the outlet of the second reactor, PSIA. I'm sorry, I'm speaking in English. And multiple design consideration. Oh, one more thing on the reactor ID is also very important because of the distribution to avoid the wall effect, to avoid the gas pockets. It's very important to have a reactor ID which is either operating or it has been modeled in our cold flow models. So just extending the reactor ID because it can be fabricated has to be looked at very critically. It should not be done without doing the distribution effect study. And on the design side, there are multiple in our designs with furnaces, the flux requirement, the coil outlet temperatures, over designs. There are multiple factors go into the design. Reactor thermometry, which is even when the power is fair, let's say, the operator should not run blind. So there is a provision that operator can still see reactor temperatures. There's of course a depressurization in case of emergency. Separator internals and residence time of especially high pressure and hot separators, very, very important because reactor outlet effluent is coming at almost at 428 or so C. It has to be quenched to avoid further cracking. At the same time, it's still hot, so you have to manage quenching in the hot separators effectively. Hydrogen is still uh, dissolved at high temperatures in the liquid. It tries to bubble out, so you have to quench. The foaming could be an issue, which again, you have to manage it very well if not designed properly. Foaming is also a function of feed, so especially feed viscosity. So multiple factors play into this role. Then residence time of the especially high pressure uh, separators, very, very critical. Metallurgy, of course, because feed could be high chlorides, it has high metals, high nitrogen, it's a VR feed. So metallurgy is very important for unit reliability. And all this over the years have graduated to a level which I would say is almost become a standard now for many of the feeds, which may, like older units and to today's unit, we have database of over 40, 50 crudes which have been processed in LC refining. Gas underflow, like I said in separators, if the hydrogen is still dissolved, and once you flash it from high pressure to low pressure, the hydrogen will come out. And sometimes those are not factored in and could impact the overhead system, which was a learning over the years. Atmospheric tower section, vacuum tower section, the trays, the metallurgy, the chloride sometimes comes, if you have much higher chloride, it'll not only go in the vapor circuit, it'll come down to atmospheric section, and on the top of the atmospheric tower section, that could be a corrosion issue there, which is managed very well with the water wash and metallurgy. Vacuum tower section, and of course the VTB exchangers and hydraulic, that's where most of the units have problem because of the asphaltene precipitation. And asphaltene precipitation is happening because you're disturbing the balance of uh, the asphaltenes and the resins and the saturates. And as you go deeper and deeper into conversion, now the asphaltenes, the heavy asphaltenes which are left, they have no molecules or resins to keep them in solution. And as they get concentrated at the back end on the vacuum tower area, furnace or vacuum tower bottoms, and as you cool that VTB, they start to precipitate and cause falling. And that's the major challenge in today's, especially when you push the unit beyond its design limits. So what do we do as a operator or as a designer? We have some proprietary equations. We look at each feed based on, the equation is based on feed metals. It incorporates NC7, NC5 insolubles, and few API and all that. And then we calculate what we call feedstock operability index. And this is plotted here, which shows that if you have between 0 to 5, which is mostly Middle Eastern feed, Arab light, Arab medium, Arab heavy, those are relatively easier. It's all relative to different feeds and crudes. So if you go between 5 to 10, Urals and Isthmus, as shown here, are challenging in the range of 60 to 70 is its conversion levels, as you show on the right bottom of the chart. And as you go more right, the high metal feeds, Mayan or Dewey high paraffinic feed, it's very, very challenging and difficult for a residue hydrocracker. As far as they're kept in the blend, at a low level, it can be processed. It's not that they cannot be processed. We have design units with Mayan, with Dury, and many crudes. But as far as they are 15, 20% in the feed, it can be managed and operated. The other important measurement of the feed characterization is CII, what we call Colloidal Instability Index. It's based on SARA, and SARA has its own challenge because of the reproducibility and repeatability. But still, it's a good indication if the data is available. Basically, you're calculating a ratio of saturates and asphaltenes over aromatics and resins. So higher the aromatics and resins, the lower the CII, the better the feed from processability point of view, from stability point of view, from sediments point of view. So the bottom two charts, as you see, actually we have plotted CII with, again, sediments. It falls pretty much in line with sediments and CII, whereas a feed operability index is just a little bit of out of sync, or say it gives us good indication, but it's one of the indication, let's put it way. It's not as good as maybe CII, but CII also has its own limitation. It's just an indication. It is not an exact measurement of sediment, of the severity of the unit. And then how do you measure the sediments? Pretty much most of the units rely on shell hot filtration test, which is ASTM D4870. And it's just a filtration at 100 degrees C of the sample. So it has its challenges to do shell hot filtration test on either VR feed because of the viscosity and or the vacuum tower bottom, again, because of the heavier feed, higher viscosity. It takes long time to filter through the sample, and other drawback of shell hot filtration test is it does not differentiate between organic and organic sediment. It's just a one lump of whatever residues left on the filter. So results are good indicative, or a quick indicative, because it's an easy test, but it does not give the full picture. So to overcome the challenge of VTB measurement, many units do shell hot filtration test on AR, atmospheric column bottom, or on the MPHT, medium pressure, high temperature bottoms, which goes to atmospheric column. The question would be where it's a good sediment level, acceptable or not. Typically, industry practices around 1500 ppm, but it can be high, depends where the UCO is going, whether how much of that is being cooled to what temperature. Sediments can be higher. And so, and there's a correlation between, if you cannot measure VTB, you can measure at ATB, or like I said, MPHT bottom. And there, what are the sediment levels? You can develop, industries, refiners have developed correlation that if let's say if it is 600 to 800 in that area of AR, and then it'll be around 1500 at the VTB. So very quickly, just a quick summary of this analytical tools we have, or a refiner has at its disposal, but they all come with some limitation. Commercial experience is the key. Think Charlotte filtration test, I said VR feed is a challenge. So interstate sample or a product on AR or VR, of course, you cannot measure catalyst health in that. And sample is very sensitive to aging. If it is stored for a long time, if it is exposed to oxygen, it will get degraded and will give you wrong sediment levels. Feedstock operability index is very quick, rather a relative tool between different feeds. SARA-based CII is good, but again, has its repeatability issue with the SARA. Spent catalyst is needed for spent catalyst analysis to see how the catalyst injection and how the catalyst performance has been. That's where our partner ART can help in doing the spent catalyst analysis. The metal on the catalyst, the coke on the catalyst, that's what typically is measured. And then the last one, which I did not go over, it's more of a compatibility test. Let's say if you're processing a very paraffinic crude with very aromatic crude, if you blend it, you have to be careful of settling down of the paraffinic crude should not cause an instability in the storage tanks or in the back end of the column, the vacuum column. If you've seen some segregation of different products coming in, if you're blending something, that's where the compatibility test is, what's called p-value. For the benefit of time, I did not go into that. So commercial experience is the key, although we have multiple tools, but how do we now, earlier we talked about only shell hot filtration test, which is giving us one bulk data. But as a licensor, as a technology provider, and as a operator, we want to know, right, the sediment is really where I should stop, or what is in this sediment. So that's where we have developed a proprietary methods where you can identify between good and bad and ugly asphaltenes. Not all asphaltenes are bad. So this test is very important to understand what level of severity you can design or push the unit. And also, of course, it's always a function of to what level also you're cooling at the back end. Very important, what exchanges you're using and how, and like I said, if you're making VLSFO, the compatibility issue also needs to be taken into account, as that might cause or accelerate settling of the ugly ones first, precipitation of asphaltenes causing falling in the exchanges. Moving on to very quick, I think I covered most of it. For a reliable design for a new unit, of course, the feed processability, looking at all the above which I mentioned. And then if you have a pilot or a commercial database, you can always, for a typically or equivalent feed, you calculate the K hydrocracker, and then you decide on the new feed, that where does that fit, of which is K hydrocracker is a function of space and number of reactors. So it gives you an idea, if I process this feed, this is the K, and then if I process this feed with that, how much of that K is in that range that I can process, and what kind of performance I can expect. I covered the space and reactor temperature, feed overlap, and thermal and catalytic contribution is important to realize because we know this residue hydrocracking is a thermal process. This thermal process, it's temperature dependent. As you increase the temperature, the rate of thermal cracking will increase, the free radical formation will increase. And now hydrogen is needed to saturate those free radicals to avoid polycondensation and settling of that onto catalyst or to any other lower temperature surface. So catalyst is important, hydrogen partial pressure is important, and reactor temperature to balance thermal and hydrogenation. That's the handles you have to play to avoid any instability in the reactor. Catalyst I talked about, dual versus single, but what's more important or equally important is handling of catalyst, especially attrition, because in the reactor, for the benefit of time, I'm not showing any video here, but within the reactor, the feed is going through from the top to the bottom, 8 to 9 times of the feed rate is in the circulation. So the reactor temperature, that's why it is done is to create near isothermal conditions in the reactor. So the reactor bottom to top temperature delta is 3 to 4 degrees C. And because of the thermal reaction, you want to minimize that delta T. But due to that back mixing, due to that high liquid flow and catalyst being added and continuously withdrawn, the catalyst movement is happening, and that could cause attrition. And how the catalyst is handled before addition, slurry versus pneumatic, plays a role in attrition. And that will end up at the top of the reactor, and eventually it'll come out, will cause erosion, and also end up in your vacuum column bottom and will show up as sediments and cause an issues if the UCO is going somewhere, let's say even in coker furnace, or even a blend to VLSFO or HSFO, wherever that's going. So very important to minimize attrition by using slurry catalyst transfer, which we designed for. And product target specification of LPG. I think that Bapco is very familiar about LPG issue, UCO stability destination, VGO downstream processing. All these are critical factors to know how much of VGO can be processed in the downstream hydrocracker at what cut points, UCO stability, whether it's blending going to VLSFO or a blend of fuel oil, cutter stocks to get to the spec of stability, and experienced vendors and the whole ecosystem of residue hydrocracker and LC refining. Over the years, vendors' experience is very critical for, let's say, let down wall station, ablated pump. All these play a very important role. Very quickly on, hope I'm okay on time. Continuous improvement in catalyst system is very important, and we have been doing that, as you can see from the bottom 1980 to every few years there's a new catalyst, and now we have what we call ECAD and HSLS plus, and others are still are good catalysts, but there's activity and metal capacity balance. Metal capacity means it can take more metal onto it, and So it means injection rate can be adjusted according to metal capacity, feed, and severity. Dual catalyst, I went over that, but the chart on the right shows the benefit of sediment reduction if you're processing or an operating unit, or if it is a new unit, you can see the benefit of designing with the ECAD. It helps in pushing the severity if you're use a dual catalyst over a single catalyst in cascade system. And in our testing, we found it dual catalyst much more better and a long-term solution than a moly injection at the back end. So on the asphaltene, as we are doing asphaltene conversion of the we are producing VGO, and that VGO from its bulk properties might look very similar to straight run VGO, but if you go deeper, because it's being coming from bigger asphaltenes, which is being thermally cracked, so it's quite ringy. It has much higher concentration of benzopyrrolenes and even coronenes than a straight run VGO, which is measured by what we call double bond equivalent, which is shown here how to calculate. It is, the plot shows here that this residue hydrocracker VGO shifts more towards higher DBE, means lower hydrogen molecules, and much higher concentration of that. If you see that DBE 15, 14, and to 2023, much higher concentration of ringy molecules. So very difficult for a fixed bed catalyst. Very important to have a right catalyst system, right scheme. We have a catalyst system which selectively goes after those molecules, whereas the conventional gets inundated with those molecules and it does not saturate those benzopyrrolenes and heavy molecules. Now, if I'm designing LC fining and down the road, I want to increase the conversion beyond, let's say, closer to 91, 92%, you can take the UCO and put SDA, and in fact, you can lower the severity in your vacuum in the first two reactors. And then you can push the conversion that way. This is a very smart solution. And in increasing the conversion, at the same time increasing the reliability of the unit, because now you can reduce severity in the first stage or the first two reactors, and then take out all the asphaltenes, heavy asphaltenes in the SDA from the vacuum tower bottoms, and then go to another reactor, DAO reactor. Now DAO is pretty much asphaltene free. It's like a two-stage hydrocracker concept. And now DAO conversion can be very high, and the overall conversion could be 90 to 93, 92, depending on the feed. Just the challenge is pitch, but pitch has some destination like cement plant. It can go to CFBC, which generate power or gasifier. So it depends. The pitch has some destination. We have also tested part of it can be blended into a road grade asphalt, but not all of it because of the ductility issues and the other issue. It doesn't have resins. The other smart solution is you can take LC fining UCO to downstream coker. That is actually can give you much higher yields in the high 80s, closer to 90, depending on the feed and the conversions between the two units. And you can make green coke or anode coke. And the good part of that is the heavy coker gas oil, it's also getting cleaned up in this. It's, as you see, the VGO is at the lower, the green one. The heavy coker gas oil is the light blue one. It doesn't have those high ring molecules we saw in the synthetic VGO from residue hydrocracker, but it has a lot more of the lower dBE. So it does require still a lot more hydrogen and saturation, but it's relatively easier to process than a residue hydrocracker VGO, especially if the cut point is controlled well. Okay, residue hydrocracker UCO, we have another smart solution that in case you don't want to go to coker or gasifier, UCO can also go to a gasifier, like Northwest is taking LC-fining UCO to gasifier. Coker is, of course, many Marathon is doing, and the other units we are considering. But it can also go, UCO can go to a combination of RDS and LC-fining, that concept where you put a filter and an RDS type reactor and make VLSFO less than 0.58% sulfur, IMO compliant. And this has been tested very extensively and has already been licensed. So this is a good concept today to make VLSFO. I think this is my last slide. This is on the training. There's people who are designing, people who are operating can tell you the training, importance of this training. And we have, of course, classroom trainings and videos and on-site training, but we have also opened with collaboration of NAPCON and BAPCO in Bahrain, online training simulator, which provides an excellent simulation-based, cloud-based. You can simulate a scenario, any emergency scenario, or you can see how if you change certain parameter, how it behaves. A very good online training simulator. I think many of you who are either designing or under construction or at different stages of LC-fining or residue hydrocracking should certainly at least look at this. It's a very important and a powerful tool. I think with this, I conclude. Thank you very much.
Anyway, thank you, Aaron, and for this presentation. And the floor now is open for questions and answers. You can either use the chat box or raise your hand to ask questions. And I have a few questions from the chat box. One of them is, what is the maximum sediments level a unit can operate reliably?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that it depends. There's no one particular number for different feeds. You have to see and what type, where you're going with UCO. If you're going hot UCO to coker, sediment levels can be very, very high. It won't bother you. It starts bothering units if you're cooling it. But typical, if you're making fuel oil and blending, units try to operate around 1500 is like a, but it can vary depending on the UCO destination.
Mm-hmm. For others, if anybody has a question.
Hi, I'm Lokesh. Thanks, Arun, and thanks, Akhil, for a nice presentation. I have one question. The asphaltenes, the feed asphaltenes we have, how much percent, per reactor they go on catalyst, and how much percent they get cracked, and how much you can say you can't touch them and they just dropped out as a precipitation?
Yeah, it's very hard to say how much. It's a CCR, HTCCR is what we are measuring, and typically HTCCR is of course going from easy to difficult in that sequence, right? So there's a number which can be estimated, but it's very difficult to pinpoint, okay, this much asphaltene conversion has happened, unless you do, like we said, a detailed analysis of feed sediment or feed asphaltenes coming in, and then you have your sediments and you see what is there in the sediment, right? Organic sediment. And
Yeah.
but we have tools which we can calculate or estimate, but there's no way to know exact what. It's primarily HTCCR.
Yeah, one thing I also want to add is that it's really feedstock dependent and the type of asphaltenes. Just as we indicated, there's good asphaltenes and bad asphaltenes.
Right.
We know if you measure the asphaltenes based on C7 insolubles in the feed and our product, we do convert the asphaltenes, but it's highly feedstock dependent, and as we indicated, the South American crudes have bad asphaltenes, and then you really don't get too much of a chance to convert those asphaltenes before you run into sediment issues.
Do you have a definition of good and bad asphaltenes?
Yeah, good. There is that. It's basically if you do NC7 insoluble is your bulk, then you go to NC5, right? And then you basically getting into different solvents, and that's what the proprietary method we have is. You segregate with the different solvents from easy to difficult. It's hard to give you over this, but very broadly is yes, you do NC7, then you do NC5 insolubles, right? That'll give you 2 level right there.
Sorry, did you want me to repeat that?
Yeah, you were saying something about feed bypass, right?
Yes, the feed bypass around our first reactor going into the second reactor. My understanding at the time of operation, that was used to help keep our asphaltenes in a solution. Is that still the case?
Yes, feed bypass is an important parameter to keep sediment level or stability, especially in the second reactor where we're going deeper. So that's to provide aromaticity, you bypass some feed. Yes, that's the question, right?
Yes, that's it. I was just confirming. Thank you.
I have another question. What is the maximum conversion achieved in industrial unit? And the LSFO configuration, and what kind of filtration is it? And is it already in operation on bottom residue?
Sorry,
to repeat the question, what is the maximum conversion achieved in an industrial unit?
Okay. Yeah, the maximum conversion achieved in our GS Caltex unit is as high as around 84-85%. But they operate in close to 80 now.
Okay, and for LSFO configuration, and what kind of filtration is it?
What kind of configuration?
Filtration for the LSFO configuration.
Oh, LSFO filter. Okay, so that's a very it's a special filtration system which we have tested, and actually it is tested for our slurry technology, which has its micron catalyst, so which is recycled back. So for that system, this catalyst, this filter was developed, and it is tested at a in our large demo scale type unit in Richmond, has operated for 1 year roughly on continuous basis. And the performance based on that is what we have designed for VLSFO as well. So it's a special catalyst system, filter system.
We'll wait if
It's not a dead
has a
end.
question.
It's not a dead end type filtration.
Okay, one of the questions said, you indicated that LC finding is a thermal cracked and is a thermal cracker, and hydrogen partial pressure is critical parameter. Can you explain why hydrogen partial pressure is critical?
Sure. Louis chip in. Louis is here to help me on answers. So Louis, help
Well,
me. Otherwise, I can. I mean,
yeah, I think after thermal cracking, you need to hydrogenate the olefins and the unsats because if you don't hydrotreat them properly, they will form polymers and cause sediments to build up. So we've done various tests from low hydrogen partial pressure to high hydrogen partial pressure. So definitely the high hydrogen partial pressure will suppress sediments formation. So, you know, we have a saying, if your thermal cracking exceeds your hydrotreating reactions, you run into trouble. So you want to have a balance between the two, and to hydrotreat these molecules that are unsaturated coming out of the thermal reaction, it is what we need, high hydrogen partial pressure.
Another question is, can the unit be operated without a vacuum column? And if yes, for how long?
yeah, good question. Yes, a unit can be operated without vacuum column, and that's a very standard step for older units. And we also build into our new units a bypass. Typically takes around 5 to 7 days type. In case you need to clean up, you can bypass vacuum column and operate unit at relatively lower throughput, limited by the vacuum column bottom hydraulic circuit, and still operate the unit.
Another question is, when it comes to catalyst handling, you mentioned pneumatic catalyst. What do you mean by pneumatic catalyst here? You have slurry and pneumatic. And what do you mean by the pneumatic catalyst?
Pneumatic is how when you're receiving catalyst and you're putting into FCTP, what's called the fresh catalyst transfer pot, and then to inventory bin, and then to transfer vessel, and then to reactor. So this whole process, any step of it, when you're transferring, if it has a pneumatic, it tends to generate more attrition or fines, whereas what we do is we receive directly into parts in a slurry form. In the sense there's a cushion built into the vessels so it doesn't fall into an empty vessel. So slurry system is what we apply, which helps in minimizing this attrition of using pneumatic system. In any step of the receiving to the FCTP, we have certain measures taken care that it has a cushion available and has the whole slurry system from very initial step to minimize attrition. And that we have measured in our units. At multiple units, we have measured difference between pneumatic and slurry results in much better, much lower attrition.
I have another question in front of me here. Can the unit be designed without slurry oil?
Yes, it can be. It's just how you design it. It can be done. Yes.
Okay, while we're waiting for Ranjit, I mean, there's another question here. What is the problem with using lighter feed, like Atmos resid?
Lighter feed, in general, you're wasting reactor, high pressure reactor volume, right? But there's no problem. There are units which do process AR, and you know, you can definitely process, but it's since being lighter, mostly VGO, you're wasting reactor, high pressure reactor volume. But you can operate on AR, yes.
Another question is, when a crude changes, how we can determine the optimum conversion?
When crude changes, that is the all the tools you have to first see where that lies compared to if you're already operating to that crude, and calculate all the CII, and in fact, more importantly, K hydrocracking, and then see where it fits in. That's how you, and of course the metals, feed metals, and feed contaminants. Where do they fit in related to that? And that's how it is. There's no one answer to that. It requires a lot of analysis and, of course, operation feedback from the unit and from light sensor if we can.
And the other thing is, when you do change crudes, the safer thing to do is back off on conversion first, establish your new operating sediments, and then you could go up in conversions and learn from your experiences.
Yep.
Another question about coke formation. I mean, are chemicals used to minimize coke formation? Chemical additives, for example.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I mean, are chemical additives being used to minimize coke formation?
Oh, for
because of asphaltene.
Chemicals, yeah, I don't know what you mean. To minimize sediments, if you're referring to moly injection, which is, you know, the HCATs are being used at few units. But like I mentioned in my presentation, in our testing, we have tested it that dual catalyst is a longer term, better solution, provides lower sediments and more reliable solution rather than moly injection. At least in our testing, we saw no benefit on a long-term basis in sediments from moly rather than from the dual injection. So chemicals can be done, yes, but it's a short-term solution in my opinion, and it causes some other issues, some other within the reactor instability, plugging, because it's very, very reactive. You have to inject it with the fresh feed to get it into so that give enough dilution. But as soon as it reaches furnace, it starts getting active and cause falling in that circuit from furnace to the bottom of the reactor, where there is hydrogen and there's metal and very reactive chemical moly.
I think with the moly injection, you tend to shift the problem from the VTP heat exchangers to other parts of the plant. So the cooking really is just move from one place to another rather than to solve the problem.
Right.
Okay, thanks. Another question is, how does the economics of LC Max retrofit plus the delayed cooker compares to direct delayed cooker without the LC Max?
Well, Lu, you want to say, or?
Yeah, sure. I think typically most of clients either look at LC Max or LC finding plus delayed cooking. the combination of LC Max plus the cooking makes sense if you have some external streams where you could buy, let's say, excess VR and blend it into your delayed coker. So we have done various studies. If you, let's say, design a single train max, LC Max, and you still have some excess VRs available, and you don't want to invest in the second train, then that solution makes perfect sense, that the excess VR blended with LC Max pitch can go to a coker and makes perfect economic sense. But just a single train, LC Max plus delay cooking, the return compared to just LC finding with delay cooking, the difference is not there to pay out.
Right. Just to add that the pitch is from LC Max, Ranjit, is around 70% or so CCR. So if you go, like Louis said, just single train LC Max and then you go pitch to coker, you're pretty much making coke, right? So.
Okay, at the beginning, on the first slide of your presentation, you mentioned diluent to the feed. I mean, what do you mean by diluent? I mean, why this is required?
Yes, diluent is, again, it's not required, but it is good if you're pushing the unit and you need stability. Then diluent is nothing but aromatic, rich in aromatics like slurry oil or even pie oil from mixed feed steam cracker, because it provides aromaticity and which is needed to keep those unconverted asphaltenes in solution. If you're pushing it beyond that limit, yes.
We have another question here. Maybe we had a similar question earlier here. If using atmospheric feedstock versus back bottoms feedstock at the same temperature as vac feed, what will possibly lift catalyst? What will possibly lift catalysts over the collection band due to lighter gas oil in the atmosphere? Actually, I didn't understand the question fully.
Okay, I can see that if using
atmos bottoms feedstock versus back bottoms feedstock at the same temperature.
Right, yeah. So
we will possibly lift catalyst over
the
collection band.
We'll chip in if you want, if you have anything. But typically when you run AR, you don't run at the same temperature as VR, right? So there are units which run AR mode, and then they're running AR mode to make a more VLSFO, let's say, or LSFO mode. You want to, then you have to tone down the reactor severity and temperatures.
Well, and the other thing concerning lifting the callus is we control the ebulliting pump speed so that you do not, so the speed of the ebullition pump would be different for the two different feedstocks, so that you do control the elevation or the ebullition of the callus, so you don't lift them over the pan.
Oh, there's a question here. What is the impact of sedimentation if we are operating with atmospheric resid feed?
Impact on sedimentation will improve in the sense because your severity has gone down. As you're pushing AR, you're also running at lower severity. And primarily you're making, or you're processing AR again to make a little more fuel oil or a lower sulfur fuel oil. So you're blending also a little more lighter at the bottom. So sedimentation is typically better with AR. Unless you push the severity with AR, then it's an issue. Louis, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think Also, it's feedstock dependent. If it's a good feedstock like Middle East high sulfur crude, the impact is less. But if you're dealing with a South American poor FC finding feedstocks, then has a major impact. So also very much feedstock dependent. If you're dealing with something like a Canadian tar sand, I mean, they do process kind of AR to the unit as well, and not have sediment issues.
Okay, another question here. We have, in addition to the fresh catalyst, is one of the measures for sedimentation control in hydrocracker reactors, rigid hydrocracker reactors. This also promotes sedimentation due to the increased conversion. So what is the best way to control sedimentation and optimum way to achieve a balance between them?
No. The sedimentation is function of multiple things like feed and reactor temperature, and of course catalyst system helps in and the dilution and all that stuff. But just from a catalyst point of view, the continuous addition withdrawal actually helps in reducing sediment. It doesn't help or doesn't increase sedimentation unless you are reducing the cat addition. If you don't put enough catalyst and you're running at higher severity, yes, then because then it is not providing enough, like we talked about the free radical saturation, you need both hydrogen and catalyst system and the CCR conversion. So no, the addition of fresh catalyst will not cause more sedimentation. The best way to control is multiple factors like temperatures and feed severity.
Yeah, when bypassing the vacuum tower, if you have an SDA downstream, can you bypass the vacuum tower feed? Can still the vacuum tower feed be routed to the SDA?
Yes and no. Louis, chip in anytime, please, if you want. The SDA, when you're running or bypassing vacuum tower, you have in the feed VGO range material as well, right? Plenty of VGO, so it's a AR. And if you put it in SDA, that actually will cause more lift because of the paraffinic type more feed coming in, and will cause, it's not liked by SDA, let's put that way, unless if you put it in a very controlled fashion, very small amount in the feed.
Yeah, I think SDA is not typically designed for handling AR, unless of course you design for it. So right. you'll be hitting bottlenecks along the way. So you may be able to run at reduced rates to an SDA. People have designed SDAs to handle AR. So if you want to make that one of the design consideration for the SDA, knowing that sometime in the life of the plan, you're going to be running AR through it, then probably it can work.
One more question here. You mentioned a few analytical tools for LCF, like SHFT, FOI, SARA. So which one is the most recommended one?
Yeah, you have to use all to your advantage, whichever works for you. SARA is relatively, FOI is just an equation, right? Which we use. It's the hot shell filtration test is very widely used, but more on the product side. And SARA you can use on the feed side. So basically SARA and shift. SARA is on the feed and SHFT on the product. But again, like I said, it only gives part of the answer. Commercial.
I think as you operate, you build up your own database, and I think that's probably the best
Right.
rule for running it. And we have clients that as they run, they know exactly that which crew will give them the best, let's say, conversion and yields. But sometimes those crudes cost more money compared to other crudes. So that's the economics when you have an LC finder, right?
Thank you, Aaron and Louis, for this informative presentation, which enlightened us, at least enlightened me, of the LC finder and the importance of having a resid hydrocracker in a refinery, especially for those refineries who are aiming to maximize, to improve bottoms, conversion of the bottoms of the barrel, and maximize diesel production and minimize fuel oil yield. I would like also to thank the audience for their valuable contribution and interaction. And without their interaction, of course, this webinar will not be successful. And a special thanks goes also to the GDA Technology Technical Committee members, especially Fadi Mehani from CLG, for arranging for the arrangement he has done for this webinar. And thank you also for Raj Jajaria from GDA and for his support. And thank you all, and have a nice weekend.
Yeah, on behalf of GDA, I really take this opportunity to thank Akhil for moderating this wonderful session, and Arun and Y to throw in all your thoughts and inundate us with your experience. And we had more than 80 participants from different members of our GDA family. And I have seen a very rich discussion going on. So it's a session for us. And those, as Akhil said, have any more question, you can direct it to GDA, info@gda.org.bh, and we will route it to the speakers and get you the. And by the way, this is a series of conversations we have been carrying on for the last 1 year, more than 1 year. We have 16 episodes already recorded, available on our website. Please go to our website, Media Center. You will see all of them. Variety of topics, huge knowledge base you can benefit from. And continue watching in the future. We will bring in more industry leaders and technology leaders to share experience. So with that, I would like to close this session, thanking all of you, wishing you safe health and bright future. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Arun. Thanks, Akhil. Everyone. Bye.